Alright, what is good, ladies and gentlemen, is the Master Viewer back again with another review, and tonight we are doing a review for Toy Story 4. That is right, this is another rewatch for me, and I will just come off the bat and say that going into this, I did not go in with the highest expectations, because from my first watch on this, I was not a big fan of the film, and we will just get into it, starting off with the plot. So, the plot of this film is that basically Bonnie, she is now starting kindergarten, and so she is very worried. Woody, still being very, very much, he learned his lessons from the second and third film to always be there for your kid, even when they're growing up and stuff. So even if now Woody is no longer really being played with as much compared to some of Bonnie's other toys, but Woody still wants to make sure that Bonnie is okay and everything. So he ends up sneaking off to go with her to kindergarten on her first day, where there she's like very worried. She doesn't have any friends or anything. So she ends up actually making a new friend, and by making a new friend, I mean that she physically makes a new friend, which she ends up calling Forky, which is basically a spork that she put like some of those pipe cleaners around his hands and some popsicle sticks as legs and stuff. So she made a fork toy, or a spork toy, I guess, and this is her new favorite, most cherished toy, basically. So the beginning of the film kind of focuses on a bit of an existential crisis kind of thing, where Forky is like he's alive now, but now because he himself came from trash, he constantly is trying to get to trash. So the beginning of the film is kind of like Woody just trying to make sure that Forky is there for Bonnie whenever she needs him, and so that is the beginning of the film. And Bonnie ends up going on a road trip with her parents. They are going on a road trip, and so on the way, Forky ends up tossing himself out of the window, so Woody has to go save him. So this leads to Woody and Forky getting separated from the rest of the toys, as well as Bonnie and her parents. And they end up in this town where there's basically a carnival going on that is like kind of the setting for a lot of the film, as well as specifically an antique store. So while Woody kind of has a heart-to-heart with Forky. He tells him a bit about Andy and stuff and his past, and he ends up explaining to Forky that Forky kind of views trash as being very safe, very cozy, and like that is. So Woody basically explains that is how Bonnie feels when she is with him. So Forky realizes now that he has like an obligation. He realizes like his role of like he is the one that is supposed to comfort Bonnie when she is feeling unsafe, basically. So he is now willing to. His new motive is no longer to go into trash. It's to be a toy for Bonnie, basically. So this leads into the next part of the film, where basically they're on their way to Bonnie to return to the camper and stuff. However, on the way, Woody notices the film doesn't actually start here. I forgot to mention the opening of the film is actually a scene. It was like an event that took place during around the time of the second film, after Jesse had already joined the crew, where Woody and Bo Peep, as well as Buzz, they go on like a rescue mission for the RC car that was in the first film. Like he somehow gets left outside, and he's about to get swooped in by the rain. Like the rain is about to like cause him to get lost in the streets. So Woody ends up saving him. And while this is happening, a antique collector, I think, arrives at Andy's house in order to pick up Bo Peep, so Bo Peep, I think, is like an antique collectible or something like that. So Bo Peep ends up leaving. So we actually find out what happened to Bo Peep. Like they kind of mention in the third movie how she just ended up kind of like she was taken off at some point, but we never actually found out why, and we actually get a backstory for that now. So Woody sees this antique store on the way to Bonnie's RV, or like camper, basically. And so he takes a detour. He brings Forky along with him to see if Bo Peep is actually there. And this is where they meet Gabby. Gabby, she is a doll. She is the antagonist of the film, where basically her whole motive is that her voice box does not work. And so she wants Woody's voice box in order for her to be able to be a functioning toy, so that she could reunite with her owner, Harmony. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure that they were owners. Like Harmony was Gabby's kid. I'm trying to remember, because it might be the case that they actually, because she said like straight out of the box, her voice box didn't work. Like she said that initially, like from when she was opened in the package, her voice box didn't work. So I'm actually not sure if, I'm assuming that like they worked together and stuff, but at some point I guess she just got rid of her or something like that. I'm not exactly sure how the dynamic of them went down, but anyway. So Gabby's motivation is that she wants Woody's voice box, and so she ends up taking Forky as kind of a hostage, basically. And so Woody, he ends up escaping, and he ends up along the way. I'm trying to remember the specifics of how it went down. Woody ends up in a playground. Yeah, he ends up in a playground where this is where he meets Bo Peep. And I gotta say, bit of okay, it's a bit, I have to like suspend my disbelief a bit. I know, yeah, so you could say like, oh, it's a movie about like inanimate toys and stuff, but it just so happened that Woody happened to be in the same town, I guess, that Bo Peep was in, like on a road trip. So a bit of, nitpicking there of like, oh, what are the chances that they would meet in the same town? But whatever. Anyway, so yeah, Woody is reunited with Bo Peep, and so now the mission becomes Woody needs to save Forky and to get him back to Bonnie, and so this is kind of just the rest of the film, to be honest, where yeah, they are trying to rescue Forky. Buzz also is like involved. He's trying to get Woody back and Forky as well. The rest of the toys are not really involved in most of the film. They're just kind of like delaying Bonnie's family from leaving through various methods that eventually leads to, I think, the dad almost getting arrested. So anyway, eventually I'm just going to kind of skip ahead. They enlist the help of Duke Kaboom, some more toys. There's like some carnival toys that also get involved, Bunny and Ducky, and so they're also like helping out. And so eventually it leads to Woody eventually ends up giving it, like, I think Gabby, she ends up having a heart-to-heart with Woody where she basically says, like, she ended up finding out Woody's backstory from Forky, and so she starts listing off, like, stuff that I think Woody did with Andy, and she says basically how, like, those must have been great memories, and then Woody says, like, they were great memories and stuff, and so Gabby explains how she wants, like, some of those memories for herself, and so ultimately this leads to Woody being convinced, and so he willingly gives up his voice box, and in exchange for Forky, and so yeah, that ends up happening, and so Gabby with her voice box back, she ends up Harmony is at the antique shop. The antique shop is Harmony's like grandma's shop, so she's there, and Gabby she like gets Harmony to notice her, but ultimately Harmony just doesn't really care about her anymore, so she just the grandma says like, do you want to take her or keep her, and she's like, nah, I don't, or like she says like, nah, basically. So yeah, Gabby's now heartbroken, and so Woody kind of realizes that he at this moment he decides he's going to help Gabby by bringing her to Bonnie so that another kid could love her. And so the final act of the film is basically them trying to get back to Bonnie's camper. Along the way, though, they happen to come across a lost kid that is, like I just said, she's lost, and so Gabby decides that she actually wants to go to this kid to comfort her, and so that ends up happening. And yeah, so the kid feels safer, even though she's lost. She ends up finding Gabby, so she feels safer. And then yeah, the police show up, reunites her with her parents, and so everything's good with that. So Gabby now has a kid to be with, so that's great. And then finally, so Woody is going to return to Bonnie, but then he ultimately decides that a lot of the film he was speaking about like loyalty and stuff. And it's a bit contradictory, because the whole point of like the second and a lot of the third film was basically how you got to be there for your kid even if they grow up, and even if it's like they're not going to want to play with you, even if it's like they're not attached to you anymore, you should still always be there for your kid. But in this film, Woody ultimately, like even in this film, like Woody's like, I have loyalty. It's like, I'm not going to leave my kid even if they don't care about me or whatever. So, but by the end of the film, he decides that, I guess ultimately he decides like, okay, if Bonnie's not going to play with him anymore, he might as well just like start finding a new purpose in life, which he ultimately decides he's going to help other kids he's going to help other toys find kids to be with. So I guess that's like a good purpose for Woody and stuff, but it does just kind of, I know it doesn't feel like it doesn't feel like the morals it feels like the morals are a bit contradictory, and they're like kind of clashing, where it's like a lot of this franchise has been built on the themes of like always be there for, at least for the toys. It was like the toys, like they're always there for their kids even when the kids grow up, and even if like the purpose of a toy is like to be there for the kid. But then in this film, it's like, I don't know, Woody just decides ultimately like he's not going to be there for Bonnie anymore. So it does not feel, and I get like, yeah, Bonnie doesn't really care about him anymore, and so he's finding like a different purpose. And it is like about how learning to, I don't know, he's moving on to a different stage in his life, but even so, it's like I feel like they could have maybe portrayed it a bit better, maybe had some more like dialogue scenes of like Woody expressing his mindset of like, oh, I don't know, he could have said something about how Bonnie, like, I don't know what they could have done better. I'm not going to pretend like I had like a better solution for how they could have portrayed it, but I feel like it just wasn't portrayed that great. The message of, I guess, I know what the message is. The message is like moving on in life. Like it's I don't know, finding a different purpose. That's like the theme or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, so yeah, then so there is a nice final scene. The final scene of the movie is basically, besides like the post-credit scenes, the final scene is basically Woody saying his goodbyes to first Bo Peep, but then ultimately he decides to say his goodbyes to like the rest of the toys. So he says goodbye. I mean, I kind of wish that like Woody and Buzz, their whole goodbye was basically like Buzz. They kind of look back at each other and they say the whole to infinity and beyond line, but it would have been nice if like they had a handshake or something like in the previous film where they did have a handshake. I thought that was pretty good. So yeah, it was good in the last film. In this film, it's like they don't have like a moment like that. But anyway, all the toys kind of say their goodbyes. Woody ends up staying with Bo Peep, and his new mission is now to rescue toys. So the post-credit scene is that he is rescuing toys from like carnivals, because I think most carnival games are rigged, so the toys would never have gotten paired with kids anyway. So, and there's another post-credit scene where I think Bonnie's in first grade now, and she makes a new kind of version of Forky, except it's a female version, and so I'm sure she'll be prominent in Toy Story 5 when I end up seeing that. So yeah, overall, the plot of the film, I'm going to honestly give it probably like a 2 out of 5. I'm going to say I didn't really like it. Again, I don't know what it's going to take for me. I don't even think I am ever going to really give it 1 out of 5, to be honest. I don't think there's like a film that I'm ever going to watch that's like I absolutely despise the plot. Maybe at some point I'll get to a film like that, but it's going to be like extremely rare for me to ever give it 1 out of 5, I think. But yeah, this plot was a, you know what, fine. What was that film? 2001: A Space Odyssey. That gets a 1 out of 5. Still to this day, that is my least favorite movie. But anyway, 2 out of 5 plot. I did not like it. It felt like, in comparison to all the previous films, where it's like the first film, Woody feels jealous about Buzz, and so I thought that was like a good plot for the film. The second film, where Woody gets kidnapped and the toys have to rescue him, that was also like interesting. The third film with, the third film with like the whole prison breakout in Sunnyside Daycare and Andy growing up to college and stuff, that was like interesting. This film, it's basically Woody is kind of like self-anxious about his role as being Bonnie's toy, which just I didn't really care for. And then there was a bit of the aspect of like Forky at the beginning, which I actually did find kind of interesting, but then afterwards it's like they barely focus on him, and they focus a lot on just this whole thing about Gabby, which I just didn't really care for as a character at all. So yeah, overall the plot, it just didn't really work for me. I'm giving it a 2 out of 5. I didn't really like it. And so yeah, in terms of the characters, this very much focuses on Woody. In the last few films, like in the second film and the third film, it did feel like the side cast, they had a more prominent role. Like it feels, I know that Don Rickles, he sadly died, so I think he's the voice of, if I'm not mistaken, he's the voice of Mr. Potato Head. So it's like, for that I can kind of forgive where Mr. Potato Head doesn't have as many lines. I think the lines that they did use for him, it was just like old footage or old recordings that they had of Don Rickles. So, but even Ham, Slinky, Jesse, even like all these side characters that felt very prominent in the last few films, it's like they just don't have, they feel like very just side casted in this film, where it's like they don't have a prominent role at all, except to like just delay Bonnie's family from leaving the carnival area. So it's a shame with them. Buzz also, like Buzz feeling like a very prominent character in the previous films, he doesn't really, in this film, it's like the whole gimmick with him is that he like, Woody talks to him about an inner voice, and then he realizes it, and then he starts like pressing the button that his toy has that like uses voice lines, and so he kind of uses that as a guide for the entire film, which is fine. It's like it wasn't bad, but it still kind of felt like he just was, I don't know, it didn't feel as, again, he feels less prominent than he did in the previous films. Bo Peep, it's I guess nice seeing her back. Like she is definitely not one of my favorite characters from this franchise, but I guess it was cool to see her again. Like she's probably best in this film that she was in. Like in the previous film, she wasn't really a important character at all. So in this film, like I guess to see her having a more prominent role, I guess is nice. But yeah, Woody, he's fine, I guess. Again, like I don't really like the whole self-conscious angle at the beginning of the film. It's not really my favorite. Forky, he is good, I guess. Forky was alright, don't really have any complaints about him. Gabby is the villain. For one, most of the films, like I just don't I don't feel bad for her at all, because like her whole thing is that she's just very selfish. She's like, she wants to take Woody's voice box. He doesn't want to give up his voice box. So it's like, she feels like very much like, I don't know, she's not like sinister about it, which she's just like very much just she's trying to act all like nice and stuff, but she's doing this like really, this thing, she's kind of like forcing Woody to give up his voice box that he clearly doesn't want to do. So I just like don't, yeah, as a character, it's like they're trying to make her like kind of sympathetic, but I don't find her sympathetic. And so when ultimately when Harmony, when she doesn't care about her, I don't really feel bad for her, because it's like I don't like this character. So Benson was like the puppeteer doll, the dummies that were, there was like 4 dummy dolls that were helping Gabby out. Their names were Benson, and they were fine, kind of creepy, don't really care for them. Bonnie was fine, I guess. I don't really have too many thoughts about her. Like she wasn't really prominent in the third film, except towards the end. I think that she was good in the end. This film, she's just, I don't know, I kind of forgot the fact that she's like still a child, so she is just kind of mostly annoying. She's just like, I don't know, complaining anytime Forky's not there, I guess. So she doesn't really have a role except to be just a child that is upset when she doesn't have her toys. So I don't really care for her, and I liked her like role in the third film more than her role in this film, where her role is just basically to, I don't know, be a plot device, not really a character in any way. So anyway, who else? Let's see here. I think I mentioned Duke Kaboom was fine, voiced by Keanu Reeves. Always like his performances, and he was a fine character, not too important, but he was a nice addition to the cast. Ducky and Bunny, voiced by I forgot their names. It's like they're a really popular duo, but I'm not really the biggest fan of theirs. Key and Peele, something like that. I know that they're like very big and stuff. I've seen some of their sketches. They're fine. I'm not really the biggest fan of their like sketches or performances or anything like that. So, but they were fine in this film. Like they had some good comedic moments. I'll say that. So, overall, the characters I will give probably I'm gonna go with 6 out of 10. I'm gonna say above average, but definitely like not as good as the previous films, I would say. So, in terms of the settings. The settings were not great. I did not like the antique shop. It felt very boring. Like, up until this point, it's like we had the first film where it was like Annie's room, so fine, it's still like a kid's setting, basically. The second film where it's like the city areas, which I thought were good, like the actual toy store and stuff, the airport sequence at the end, even just, I don't know, Al's apartment, it all looked pretty nice, I would say. Like, I actually did like the settings of the second film. The third film, it's like the daycare and stuff. It was very on theme for like toys and stuff, as well as, I don't know, some more of Andy's house, the final garbage area. I thought that they were all really good settings. This film, it's like the antique shop, very boring, didn't really care for. The carnival setting was all right in a few cases, but even so, it's like I didn't really care for it at all. There was the RV, there was Bonnie's room for like a bit in the very start. It's just overall, I didn't really like the settings at all. It felt just, up until those points, like we had a lot of good settings for a story about toys, and then like I guess the carnival, it's like, yeah, fine, kind of toy themed, I guess, but the antique shop just felt really boring. So I'm gonna give the settings probably like I don't know, I'm thinking honestly between like a 4 to a 4.5. I'm thinking between bad and not good, and I'm going to be, should I be harsh or generous? I'm going to be harsh with this. I'm honestly just going to call it bad. I did not like the settings. They were just really, really boring, especially in contrast to the previous film. So in terms of the visuals, this looks very high quality. I'll say that. Like it feels like they're around this time. Also, I think Soul came out, and this feels like an era of Pixar where they're very much kind of focusing on more realistic art styles rather than the previous films where it felt a bit more on the cartoony side. Whereas this one, they're very much kind of going for realism, it feels like. So, but honestly, I don't really like it as much as like the third film. The third film, or even the second film, it did feel a bit more cartoony, where this one, it does kind of focus a bit too much on like the realism side, which is like, it definitely looks impressive, I'll say, but it does not feel as good as the previous films, which felt a bit more cartoonish, I would say. So the visuals, I will give probably like I don't know, it's still like, we'll go, I don't really care for any of the visuals, to be honest. I'm just going to give it like a 5.5. I'll say it's decent visuals. Like, it still looks impressive, I'll say, like to be able to animate like this, to be able to have this animation existing, it's still like impressive, I would say, but I don't really like it in the context of this kind of movie compared to like the previous film. Like, I would even say, honestly, I like the first film's visuals more than this one, because this one just like, it focuses too heavily, I feel like, on some of the realism compared to the previous films, where it felt more like an actual imaginative kind of cartoon movie that we're watching compared to this one. So in terms of the worst thing I would say, I don't know, I can just reuse the worst score, which was the plot, I guess, so I'll reuse that and give it another 2 to 5, because I don't really have anything off the bat I could say a lot of things, honestly. I could point, I didn't like Gabby, I didn't like the settings, I didn't like the plot. Like, there's a lot of things I didn't really like about this film, but I'm going to probably say the plot. I'm just going to reuse a 2 to 5, because yeah, this is definitely the weakest plot out of any of the films. I haven't seen Lightyear, so maybe Lightyear will have a weaker plot, and I haven't seen the fifth one also, so when I get to the fifth film, hopefully the fifth film will be better. So yeah. In terms of the best thing, I will say I did like the ending. The ending did still, like, the Toy Story films have always pretty good endings. I don't remember too much. I think the ending for like the first film, it wasn't like emotional, but it was like a very cool chase sequence at the end, so I did appreciate that. The second film, again with the action sequence, like the films have good action sequences for their finales. Specifically with the third one, though, it had like a very impactful emotional ending. This film doesn't really have the action sequence for the big final, except I guess the Duke Kaboom sequence, which compared to what we've seen up until this point, it feels a bit lackluster. But yeah, it still did have the emotional packed ending, which I did appreciate, which I would say it was like pretty good. I'll say like a 7 out of 10 I'm going to give it. So yeah, pretty good ending with like Woody saying his goodbyes to all the toys and stuff. I'm not sure how they're gonna like what they're. I'm actually interested now in what they're gonna do in the fifth Toy Story movie, where like Woody is gonna return in it. So I am wondering how that the reconciliation, not reconciliation, that's not the right word, reunion. I'm wondering how that reunion is gonna go down, like how he's gonna end up meeting them again, all the rest of the toys. So yeah, that is all the notes, and I already mentioned everything up until this point, so I'm going to do the calculations. So King Crimson. All right, so it ends up coming out to about a 5 out of 10, which would be not good or bad, and I think I would probably still give it like around between like a 5 to a 5.5, but honestly, I'll be harsh with it. I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. I would say it's not a good film. I didn't think it was a good film, but I ultimately still don't think it's a bad film. It's just very much like in the middle, like compared to like all the previous films, it is my least favorite, I think. So yeah, it's got like still some good aspects to it, but ultimately it definitely falls short of its predecessors. I'm pretty sure that's the right word. So yeah, all the previous predecessors, right? Or is predecessors the one that comes after? I'm not sure. Pre, it has the prefix pre in it, so I'm assuming that it comes before. So yeah, it definitely falls short of its predecessors, but ultimately I would still say it's fine. I'm just going to give it a 5 out of 10. Maybe if I let it marinate more, it will get either slightly worse, maybe slightly better, who knows. But yeah, for now, I'm just going to call it a 5 out of 10. It's not good, not bad, but yeah. Anyway, so that is all. Yeah, that's my that's my review. Let's get to the outro. So yeah, that is pretty much all there is to it. So if you have any recommendations, any shows, movies, video game stories, anime, manga, web series, anything that you want me to review, leave it in the comments, and I will maybe possibly check it out. With that said, that is pretty much all there is to it. So let's leave it at that.